All right, I'm Tim Hall, and I'm going to give you a little basic overview of Pro Tools today. What we're going to talk about are some preferences, where things are located, disk allocation, what the playback engine is, and just some things you need to be aware of as you're just getting started with Pro Tools. So we're not going to get into a lot of audio editing and doing tips and tricks with this one. It's just kind of getting a layout for how things are set up and where to find different preferences. So I've already got Pro Tools open here. This is Pro Tools 10 LE, and I'm just sitting in my office on campus, hence the roomy nature of my voice right now, using the internal microphone to do my recording on my laptop. So there will be some clicks in here that I won't have time to edit out. So bear with me. I know sometimes it's really annoying to hear the click, 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 click of the mouse, but I'll try to keep it down to a minimum. All right, so this is the edit window. It's one of the main windows we work from in Pro Tools. The other window we've got is the mix window. So if I press Command equals or Command plus, I can go back and forth between the edit and mix window. Notice that the window tab lights up when I do that because you can also find it in here. So that's very nice. And notice that the shortcut is listed to the right of the window or command you're trying to do. So just go over those real quick. This little icon right here would be the command key. That would be the control key, the caret, and whatever this option slash thing is the option button. And got a couple more, but it's none on this window. Any number that you see that has a little square around it is referring to the numeric keypad. So if I want to turn the transport on, or the big counter, or automation, or memory locations, anything like that, I will hold Command and press 5 on the numeric keypad. So I'm on a laptop, so I don't have a numeric keypad, so I can't do that. And there's one more in here. All right. The other icon you'll see is this little up arrow, or this little house, depending on how you like to look at it. That would be the Shift key. So those are the modifiers we have when we're working on Mac: Control, Option, Command, Shift, and they'll be very helpful for us getting used to shortcuts, making our workflow a lot quicker. But let's talk about what we see here in the Edit window. 99% of the work you do will be in the Edit window. This is where you'll see audio over here as little clips and regions that you can splice it up, move it around wherever you want. And over here you'll see what Pro Tools mode you're currently operating on. We've got some zooms right here, so if you want to zoom in, notice that my timeline is getting much bigger. So I'm zooming in when I press this way and zooming out when I press this way. If I had any tracks with some waveforms on them and I wanted to make the waveforms taller or shorter, this would also do that. And notice that when I click the mouse and just kind of hover over the tools, it tells me what tool that is. So you can see we've got the zoomer tool, the trim tool, selector tool, grabber tool, scrub tool, and the pencil tool. And notice that they're all starting top left and going over to the right. So if you were wanting to learn your shortcuts, we would start with our F buttons. Our F buttons are going to be what selects what tool we're using. F1 is going to be our mode, F1 through 4. F1 will be shuffle, F2 will be slip, F3 will be spot, F4 will be grid, and if I press F5, notice that it skips this. Those are different shortcuts, get to that later. And I go to the zoom tool, F6 goes to the crop tool or trim tool, F7, F8, F9, F10, and notice that when I press F11, it clears my desktop. Well, I've gone through my system preferences and I've turned off F9 and F10 for the cascading of the desktop, but anything that is an operating system shortcut, it will overtake your Pro Tools shortcut. So you notice that F11 clears the desktop, so I cannot use F11 for a shortcut in Pro Tools, unless if I go to the system preferences and go to keyboard shortcuts, which are under the keyboard tab, keyboard shortcuts, and I turn them off. Main keyboard shortcut you definitely want to turn off in Pro Tools is the spotlight. So if any shortcut you turn off, this should be the one. It's Command Space. That's the record shortcut in Pro Tools. So make sure you've gone through and turned Spotlight off on your Mac operating system. System preferences, keyboard, and then keyboard shortcuts. We'll do that because that way when I press Command Spacebar, it will record. Obviously, I don't have any tracks created, so it's not going to let me record. But that way, the little spotlight icon doesn't show up. If you do not have that turned on, Spotlight will turn on. I'll just show you that real quick. Keyboard, Spotlights, and turn this on. Okay, so put a check mark there. Now when I go back to Pro Tools and hit Command Spacebar, the Spotlight checks up. So that can be really annoying. So make sure you go back to your system preferences and turn that off. And by the way, if you're wondering how I'm going through all these different applications, I'm just holding the Command button and pressing the Tab key. So I notice I can go back and forth between System Preferences and Pro Tools. All right, so let's get some tracks in here so we can talk a little bit more. So I'm going to go create a track. So if we go up to the track menu up here, that's going to be where we find New Track. See how straightforward it is? And notice we've got a shortcut for New Track. Command Shift N. So I'm going to go ahead and use my shortcut, Command Shift N, and we've got a couple different tracks or options we can do. We can change it between mono and stereo. We've got audio tracks, aux inputs, master faders, MIDI tracks, instrument tracks, and we can view them in sample or tick bass. 9 times out of 10, you're going to be using sample bass, unless if you're creating instrument tracks, which you'll probably want in tick based. Basically, sample based time means it follows the when was that digital audio sampled. So it's not going to move whether you change the tempo or speed things up or slow them down. But if I have it on tick based time like so, that's going to be if I'm using a software instrument or something MIDI related. If I want my tempo changes to change the audio, so whatever I've got recorded on that track, if I happen to, let's make this song a little bit faster, it will speed up with the tempo change. All right, notice there are shortcuts to use these commands as well. So if I want to change the number of tracks instead of using the mouse and clicking, if I hold the command button and go left or right, changes the number of channels. And then you can go ahead and assume that if left and right changes the channels, up and down changes the type of track. So command up and down changes what type of track. Audio tracks are typically what you're going to use if you want to have clips and regions on them and actually have editable, yeah, so you can edit and move audio on those tracks. An aux input will allow audio to pass through it, but it will not put clips or regions on it, so you cannot edit anything. Typically, if you're going to use a headphone send or reverb send or any kind of effect like that, or a submaster, that'll be an aux input. A master fader is going to be one fader that controls them all in a nutshell. So if I've got a master fader, and if ever I'm doing something I don't have a console with a master fader, I'm doing it all in Pro Tools, I'll probably want a master fader created to see the overall summing output of the main output I'm working on, which will most likely be 1 and 2. So I'll need one of those. And the other type of track is a MIDI track, just raw track to record MIDI data to. And then the instrument track, which is very similar to a MIDI track, where it allows you to record MIDI data to it, but it also allows the audio routing, so you can go ahead and put your software instrument on the track itself, as opposed to doing a MIDI track and an aux input. So I'm going to go ahead and just create 3 mono audio tracks. And if I press Command Shift N again, which is our create a new track shortcut, notice that I can make multiple types of tracks. So I'll do 3 mono audio tracks, Command right, stereo, and Command down, or master fader. I'm going to hit create, and there we go. There's our 3 tracks. You can see that my microphone is coming through. It's working. All right, so this is the edit window. And we've got these tools, so let's see what they all do. Well, the pencil tool is not something you're going to use for audio unless if you're going to change what you're looking at. So if you can change whether you're looking at playlists, the waveform, or the volume line. So this would be the fader volume at this point. If I want to draw this in, there we go. Now I've just drawn a crazy little automation curve. So if I were to bring up my fader, which by the way, you got this little fader icon, so you can bring up your fader right there. You don't have to go Command equals to go back to the mix window if you don't want to. But notice if I press play, watch my fader. Hey, look, it's moving. There it is, it's going up. Hooray, cool. Now notice that I have no control over that fader, so if I try to turn it up while it's playing, notice that it goes back to the line that I've drawn with the pencil tool. So this is typically not something you're going to use, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. So I just press F7. Remember, we've got F5, F6, F7, F8, F9, and F10 for those tools. So I'll press F7 and just highlight what I want. Press delete. And I'm going to go back to the waveform. 9 times out of 10, you'll want to look at the waveform so you can actually move audio around. Okay, so I'm just going to put some clips in here, so don't worry about necessarily what I'm doing. I'm just giving us something to look at so I can talk about these tools. Okay. All right, so now you can see what clips look like and what regions look like. And notice that it named them based off the track name, so audio 2. So if I were to do that again and call this Tim Fun, do the same thing again, notice it is now named Tim Fun. So what your track name is prior to recording or putting audio in is going to determine your audio file name. So it's very important that you name your tracks before you record. So you get names properly as opposed to audio 1, audio 2, audio 3, audio 4. Instead, you'll get kick in, kick out, snare top, snare bottom, and so on and so forth. Okay, back on track here. So we left off on our tools, which was F5 through F10. And over here is our main counter. This is going to display the time base that we're working off right here. Right now I've got it set to minutes and seconds. So main counter selector, notice if I hover over that little drop down arrow, I get more options. If I want to look at bars and beats, I can look at bars and beats. Time code, samples if I really want. Very not practical, so I typically do minutes and seconds or bars and beats. Or I do a combination of the two. I'll do bars and beats for my main counter, and notice that you get this other option at the bottom that says show sub counter. So I'll go ahead and click that, and I'll do minutes and seconds for my sub counter. So I can see both what bar and beat I'm on if I'm recording at a particular tempo or meter, and also what minute second I'm on. And notice that the start, end, and length indicators are corresponding to what I've got selected right here. So you can see it highlighted on the track itself in the edit window, and you can also see it highlighted on the timeline right here. So I can do selections individually on the track, and notice that it's telling me I've got bar 27, that's my start right there, selected, and I go all the way to bar 42. Beat 3, and I've got a total of 15 bars and 2 beats selected. So I can do that individually on the track itself, but if I want to highlight everything, notice that if I click on the timeline and highlight, it highlights everything in the session. And just a reminder, this is the selector tool. So this is kind of what the selector tool does. It's like the icon in Microsoft Word when you're selecting words and paragraphs and sentences. Instead of that, though, you're selecting audio. So here we go. Wonderful. Okay, so back on track here. Notice that every time I'm making a selection, it is locked to the grid. And if we take a look over here, that is because I am in grid mode. So that explains grid mode in a nutshell. It only responds to things on the tempo grid. So based on what tempo you've got selected and everything, it will only move at quarter notes or half notes or eighth notes. Well, golly gee, Tim, where can I change whether it's moving on quarter notes, half notes, or eighth notes? Well, up here, right there where it says grid, you got a little picture of a quarter note. If I go down here, notice it says grid value. If I wait, and if I click on that little drop down arrow, notice that I can change my grid. So if I just do it on one bar, notice that my grid lines change. And by the way, if you don't see grid lines, it's because you don't have the grid turned on. You've got to click this grid to turn them on. You can see the downbeat of each bar, or I can go all the way down to 64th notes. So notice that I'm clicking exactly on 64th notes or bars or half notes or whatever. Very cool. If I'm in slip mode, notice that I can highlight anywhere. So I can go in between. Notice I've got 441 selected. So that would be the number of ticks for that particular bar and beat. Slip mode is your free-for-all edit mode. So if you don't want to worry about time-based tempo grid, slip is going to be the mode you're going to use, which would be F2. Alrighty. Shuffle mode is going to be F1. Remember, just like on our keyboard, top left to top right with our F buttons, it's going to go to shuffle mode. So shuffle mode basically means that if I click and drag it anywhere, notice that I can't move this. I can only shuffle it to previous regions or region boundaries. So if I got a little region boundary right there, notice that I can only go to 0, or I can go to where that region boundary is, that region boundary, or that region boundary. Notice that if I go here, it put this in front and shuffled audio 2 over to the right, hence the name shuffle mode. So if you want to extend a section of a song or something like that, you just want to drag and drop this here. If you do it in shuffle mode, it will drag and drop it to that edit point and shuffle the region to the right past wherever this one region or clip ends. Okay. Spot mode we're going to save for another video. So I'm just going to go to, oh, don't worry about what I just did, I pressed the wrong button. I'm going to go to slip mode, which is F2. The disc name is showing up. Some people like to show the full path. That, now I have to scroll all over the place to see what actual clip I'm working on, because it shows me the entire full disk path of where that audio file is stored. So I'm just going to put it on disk. Oops. There we go. The reason I like to use the disk path is so I can see what hard drive or hard disk I'm recording all of my audio files to. It should be exactly the same for everything I've got in the session. If I see something where it says Macintosh HD on one, but Buffalo Bill or Minimac or any of my other hard drives on other ones, that means that I'm recording audio files to 2 different locations, which could be a very disastrous thing if I'm going to be moving around the session a lot. So if I'm going to be working in one room one day and then take the session folder and move it to a different computer the next day, well, unless I go through and find all those audio files on all of the hard disks shown here, if I just grab my regular session folder, I'll only have a portion of my audio files. So if I want to make sure all of them are there, I'd have to go through the other hard drives and find the audio files folder and grab those as well. So that's kind of a pain in the butt. So I always say check your disk allocation before you ever start recording or doing any editing. It's probably one of the most important preferences or menus you should check prior to recording. So I'm gonna show you where that is. First, I'm gonna hide my clip bin so I don't see it. I like to have as much edit room as possible so I can see my waveforms. But let's find out where disk allocation is. So if I go over here to Setup and go to Disk Allocation, it's our third one down, this is going to tell us where all of our audio files are getting recorded to, what hard drive is getting used, and what folder are they going to. So I'm just recording everything off the desktop right now. And what you should see in here is everything should be exactly the same. So if I had like 50 tracks in here, I would see Macintosh HD, users, TD Hall, desktop, test. And then it will automatically create audio file folders, video file folders, and fade file folders for me. Granted, in Pro Tools 10, we no longer have fade file folders. It's all real-time based fades. Hooray. If you want to create custom allocation options, so say you just want to have one hard drive dedicated on your computer to record all of your audio files to, if you check this and change it to whatever folder you want, so if I click Desktop Clutter and hit Open, every session I create on this computer is going to record to this folder, regardless of where the session folder is. So Be careful with this one. I typically never use custom allocation options. I typically leave that unchecked. And another thing I definitely leave unchecked is use round robin allocation for new tracks. What this is going to do is going to look at all the hard drives connected to the computer, and it's going to spread out the audio files evenly across all the hard drives. So it'll put some of them on drive 1, some of them on drive 2, some of them on drive 3, some of them on drive 4, which is a nightmare when you're going back and forth to other rooms and other computers. Because now, to get the entire contents of your session, you'd have to grab every single file off of every single hard drive, copy it to one folder, and move that folder to your external hard drive. We don't want that. So I never use this. This doesn't really matter anymore. This first came out when hard drives were a lot slower, and it would tax the disk running, big sessions and lots of tracks and plugins. It would make it run a little bit smoother. But now computers are fast enough, we don't have to worry about it. Okay, if you want to do it individually, so if you click over here, you can select Macintosh HD, and it will put it in that place. Or you can select a specific folder if you want it to go someplace else. So if I want this to go to, let's see, desktop, and desktop, and then desktop clutter. Notice now, instead of going to, oops, wrong button, F11, instead of going to this test folder right here, it would go to the desktop clutter folder. That's bad. So now I'd have to know to remember to grab some files out of this folder and the rest of the files out of this one. If you want to change all of them to the same thing at once, if you hold the Option button before you click, it'll highlight all of them. And this is typically a shortcut that you'll use in Pro Tools whenever you want to make like all inputs the same, all outputs the same, select all the tracks, record enable all the tracks, that kind of stuff. If you hold the Option Alt button to do so before you do the command, it will do it to all of them. So I'm going to Option click, then click and hold, select folder, and go to my desktop, and just click my test folder and hit open. So now everything is going back to normal. If you do not think to check this before you start recording or anything, you have no idea where your audio files are getting recorded, and you're just assuming they're going to the session folder. It's not always the case, so be sure to check this disk allocation before you get started. Okay, so that's disk allocation, and that's the clip bin over here. You've got a whole bunch of other commands as well. So say if I want to export this one thing as its own file, either a mono file or a stereo file, I just want to export, say this is a guitar solo. I just want to export the guitar solo by itself. If I come over here and go to export clip as file, or Command Shift K, it'll just export that one little file. So I can change it to a mono or stereo interleaved format. I can do all of these different file types, MP3, WAV, AIFF, SD2. So say I wanted to make a little MP3 of this to send to someone, and I just want it to go to the desktop. So I just make it go to the desktop. There we go. It shows the destination here, and multiple mono, choose the sample rate and bit depth I want, and press export. And with MP3, it's going to ask you to do the ID3 tag, so I'll call this test1, artist test1, and press OK. Now if I go to the desktop, there's my audio file, just by itself. So there are some handy things in here that we'll go through much further, but I find myself using that one quite a bit, exporting clip as a file. It's great for if you're going to be sending raw tracks to someone and you've been doing some editing. You can export all your tracks that way as opposed to doing it the long old school method. Okay, let's talk about these things up here, some other good things to check out. Right here we've got tab to transients. This changes the tab key, hence the tab to transient buttons. When you press this and it is highlighted blue, you have tab to transients on. So if I had a track with some transients, which I'm going to do real quick, let's get some transients, audio suite, and go to the signal generator. Right here, put in a little sine wave, boom. Notice that when I press the tab key, oops, I'm going to do that. Tab, tab. Granted, this is all one long transient. It will tab to that transient. So if I delete this portion and make it to where we've got transients, if I notice that when I press the tab key, it goes right to that transient. Cool. And if I want to go left, if I hold the option button, option tab will go left. So now it goes to the beginning. With this off, the tab button only tabs to the beginning and end of a region. So option tab tabs to the left, and tab tabs to the right. Okay, so I use tab to transient when I have to do editing on like drums and stuff. If I have to either sample replace or move things, I'll tab to the transient so it goes right to the start of the kick drum or snare, and I can move it without having to do a lot of zooming. All right, this guy, we've got mirrored MIDI editing. We're not going to do a lot of that in this class, but basically if you've got two tracks selected and you're doing MIDI editing on one and you don't want to have to edit it again on the other track, so when you move notes on one track, it moves it on both of them. So mirrored. So whatever you do on one track is mirrored to the other track. I'm not going to use that right now. Another one we've got is automation follows edit. That's where we've got any kind of track automation, volume automation, plugin automation. It will follow the edit insertion based on where it is. And what is the edit insertion? It's this little cursor right here. Timeline insertion, edit insertion, cursor. I'll call it, one of those names throughout the course of these videos. Another one we've got is link timeline and edit selection. This is actually pretty useful. I definitely have both of these checked for this reason, because this link timeline and edit selection, if that is checked, wherever I click, the timeline and this little playback ruler, that's what these little blue arrows are, playback and stop rulers, will go wherever I click. So if I want to play from here, I play from here. Click over here and I play from here. Click over here and I play from here. If I turn this off, so it is no longer linking my timeline and edit selection, notice that when I click over here, my blue arrows up here, my playback and stop markers, do not follow the edit insertion. So watch what happens when I press the space bar to play. It stays in the same spot every single time. Well, that can be useful if I'm like auditioning an edit or a loop or something, but it's actually really frustrating when you come down to it. So I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to keep that off. Another one I like to do is link track and edit selection. So notice that every track that I click on, it's getting highlighted over here. Yay, we like that. If I do not have this pressed, notice that the same track stays highlighted all of the time. I like using link track and edit selection so I can do a variety of different shortcuts. First thing I'm going to do is come over here to this A to Z. It's not going to let me zoom in today. This A to Z and turn on keyboard focus. I have a lot more videos about keyboard focus that you can check out, but right now I'm just going to turn it on and give you a basic summary. Most of the time for keyboard focus, it's going to remove the modifier key for a lot of the shortcuts, like copy paste. Instead of hitting Command C, Command V, you just press C, and the keyboard knows to copy it. Press V, and it knows to paste it. Case in point, C, click V, as opposed to Command C, click Command V. So it's one less button I gotta push. But I like using that because you can navigate the session without using the mouse if you want. If with keyboard focus on, P will navigate up a track, and the button directly below it, the semicolon, will navigate down the track. And I like to use that to do record enable, solo, and mute. So if I want to shift the track status to record enable the track, or shift the track status to solo the track, or shift the track status to mute the track, if I hold the shift button and press the starting letter of any of these commands, Shift R, Hey, and now I'm recording myself twice. That's why it got louder. Shift S. Now you notice that my voice went away whenever I solo something because I forgot to solo save my talkback track. And then Shift M will mute it. That only works with this command on. If I turn link, edit, and track selection off, notice when I do Shift S, oh no, it still works. Oh, that's cool. I guess that doesn't matter. Hey, we learn something new every day. But I still like having this. So if I want to select tracks, if I hold the Shift button as I'm going down or up, I can highlight multiple tracks. So that's pretty cool. So if I want to make all of them have no input, Option Shift, no input, and now they all don't have an input. Yay. So far so good. Okay. This other one is insertion follows playback. If I turn that on, this cursor is going to follow playback. So when I stop, the cursor is going to move to when I stop. So once I press play, I started at bar 37. My cursor is here. When I press stop, look where my cursor jumped. Notice that my mouse is still here, but my cursor is over here. And I bet you if I press play again, and then stop, hey, look, my cursor moved over here. So your timeline insertion will follow playback. Sometimes this is useful when I'm doing automation or if I'm tuning a vocal and I just want to progressively, I'm not going to be doing a lot of rewinding. I'll use this. But 9 times out of 10, I do not use this. So I normally keep this off. So if I want to have a loop or listen to this selection of audio, when I press stop, it stays selected. With that on, notice that it deselects that audio and moves the cursor to here. You can also turn that on by pressing the N button using keyboard focus. So far, so good. Okay. Right now you see this little crazy screen. This is the universe screen. This is for quickly navigating up and down and left and right. So say if I've got a crap ton of tracks, so I've got 56 audio tracks. If I want to quickly scan up or down all 56 of those, I can do that from the universe. Hooray, whoop-de-doo. If I had a long session that was like an hour and a half, I could quickly go left and right. But I'm a big trackball guy, so I use my trackball scroll arm to go up and down. So I don't find myself using that very often, so I like to get rid of it. So over here in this top right corner, you press that up arrow, it gets rid of the universe. I'm also going to delete those tracks I just created because they're just taking up space. So I can delete a track by going to Track, Delete, or I can right-click on the track and hit Delete. Notice there is no undo for deleting a track. So if you accidentally delete a track, whoops, I hope you have the session saved in a different format or session file backup on. That way you can get back what you've lost. Okay, moving on, a few more preferences and things to talk about. So let's go ahead and take a look. So I'm going to go to the actual preferences here and go to Setup Preferences and talk about what we've got here. Don't worry about that. I've got Xform on my computer at home, but not on my laptop. So that's why it's telling me I don't have it. Okay, a few things I like to check. These tabs are pretty straightforward. Anything to do with how Pro Tools is displaying what you're looking at, it's going to be under the Display tab. So that talks about basics, track position numbers stay with hidden tracks. Basically what that says, if you've got hidden tracks like I've got, which we'll talk about when I get out of this, the track position numbers will stay with those positions even though they're hidden. So if I've got 3 tracks hidden over here, it won't go 1, 2, 3 for the ones showing. It'll go 1, 2, 3, and that one will say 4. We can also change how the plugins are organized. I like to, some people like the flat list, but if you've got a lot of plugins, flat list is absolutely bonkers because it's just one really long list. You're going to be doing a lot of scrolling. Category is pretty logical. It'll break up the plugins into EQs, dynamics, harmonics, reverbs, delays. Manufacturer will break them down by who made the plugin, whether it's Waves, Synoxis, Brainworks, Sonics, anything of those. But I like category and manufacturer because category is pretty quick to navigate through, but sometimes I want to go straight to a specific, a specific Brainworks plugin or SoftTube plugin that I've got, and I can just do that from selecting the manufacturer. Another thing I like to take a look at are the meters. I definitely like to show meters in the sends view, and I'll do peak hold for 3 seconds, and a lot of times for clip indication I'll leave that on infinite instead of 3 seconds. The reason I like infinite instead of 3 seconds is that's the little red light that'll show up whenever you clip or get distortion right there. I leave it on infinite because I'm not always watching all of the meters at any point in time throughout a session. I'm looking at meters on the console, I'm changing aux sends, and anything like that. But so if I get a clip and I have it set to 3 seconds, after 3 seconds that clip notification is going to go away. And that's going to be no good. Then I would have never known that a clip even happened unless if I was looking at it. Infinite means that once it clips, it's always going to be there. Okay, another thing I like to have is always display marker colors. And I like the MIDI note color shows velocity. So the actual, if you're doing MIDI editing, the color of the note or the darkness of the note will change based on how loud or what velocity you've got it on. I like default track color coding set to track type, so or none. I think at home, and don't worry about this. This keeps popping up regardless of how many times I've registered this copy of Pro Tools. So just ignore that. When I'm at home, I like none because I'm going to change it when I get into my session. But when I'm anywhere else, I just keep it on track type. And then default clip color coding, I set to track color. Notice what happens if I change it to tracks and MIDI channels real quick. So we'll come back here. Notice that my track is one color and my clips are another color. Well, that can be kind of confusing sometimes for me because I like all my drums to be a certain color, all my bass to be a certain color, all my guitars to be a certain color. And when it's a random color, it's I have to look over here to figure out what track it is. Well, if it's the same color as the track to begin with, I don't have to think about it. So I make it easier on myself. Yep, go through that and set that to track color. So when I go back, they're all set to blue. And if I double click on this far left area right here, where the track color is, it brings up our track color window. So notice if I change it to green or red or whatever, it changes the clip as well. Very nice stuff. What if I can't see track colors? Well, that means track color isn't set to view yet. So what can I change? What's viewing in the edit window? Yes, of course I can go over here and go to edit window views and change what I'm looking at, comments or no comments. But I can also do it right here from this little guy. So I can do the same thing right there. Makes it a little bit quicker. I can also change what timeline or what I'm viewing on the top horizontal bar. So if I don't want to see minutes and seconds or markers or tempo, look, notice that my tempo went away. Granted, you'll probably want to see your tempo. At minimum, you'll want to see bars, beats, minutes, and seconds, markers, and tempo. Okay, so far so good. I'm going to go check some other preferences. All right. I like to check the operation because this is telling me how Pro Tools is set up to operate, and everything in this is talking about the transport, so that's play, rewind, fast forward, record, and all those functions. And typically what I'll do is play start marker follows timeline selection, and I don't really check any of these other ones. Notice that timeline insertion play start marker follows playback. That is the same exact preference as this little button right here. So you no longer have to go through the setup preferences to turn that on. You can do it right here. So that's nice. One thing I definitely make sure is on is the auto backup. So I make sure that is enabled, and you can keep it, I think keep up to like 50 session file backups, even more. And how often you want it to save is totally up to you. If you just want to lose 5 minutes of work, 10 minutes of work, or 30 minutes of work, you can set it up to whatever. But I like to do 5 minutes, so if Pro Tools crashes or something, or my computer locks up, I only have to redo about 5 minutes of what I was working on. And I try to keep my the amount of backups I've got to a minimum, so I don't have a huge session file backup folder. Typically, if I save multiple versions of my session as I make changes, so I'll do that myself, and I only want the 10 most recent ones just to kind of have a fail-safe in case Pro Tools crashes. But if you do not have this on, your session folder, if I press F11, clear the desktop, go to my session folder here, will not have session file backups. So notice it's got 10 backups in there, and the last one was saved at 5 minutes ago. So 1:33, well, about 2 minutes ago, whatever. Okay, go back to Pro Tools here and continue. Notice we've got some editing tabs as well. I like to auto-name separated clips so it doesn't prompt me every time I put a region boundary or an edit in a clip. It just automatically adds a _0, 1, or 2, or 3, depending on the number of times you put the edit in there. And the edit selection follows clip list selection. I keep that checked. And the clip list selection follows the edit selection. Basically what that does is if I click on any of these clips or regions, I call them regions because they were regions before they were clips in Pro Tools 9. So when I say regions, I mean clips. Notice that it selects it in the edit window, and vice versa. It selects it over here. So you don't have to select it twice. It's very useful. Without that, it doesn't select it. It only does it in one place. So if I deselect these, turn these on, boom, whoop. Well, looky what it does. Let me deselect that. Click there, click there. Notice that it's not selecting anything over here in the clip window, and vice versa. It's not selecting anything in the edit window. So I don't like that. So you definitely want that on. So I'll go back over here. It's going to give me authorize, quit. Okay, moving on. Keep those up. I do not like this preference, so I do not do that. Basically what that means is if you create a new track, it will already default it to a tick time base, and if you change the tempo, it's going to change the rhythm of whatever's on that track. So that can be kind of problematic, so I typically don't. And I definitely never have auto-name memory locations when playing on. That way it'll just do location 1, location 2, location 3. That's a pain in the butt. I will definitely make my own names, so I'd like to keep that off. A couple other preferences right here that we need to check. That's all fine right there. That's just by default. Quick punch crossfade length. I'll put that at 10 to 15 milliseconds. That way whenever I turn on quick punch mode or anything like that and I punch record on a guitar, for say, it will automatically put a crossfade there when I enabled the track and pressed record. So I won't have to do it after the fact. Well, what kind of crossfade is it going to draw? Well, it's going to draw fade based off of these right here. So your default fade in can be whatever you want. I like equal power for my fade in. And your default fade out, I like this equal gain kind of swirly curve right there. Not quite an S curve, but just a little more human than that. That's very boring. And then my crossfade tool is going to be this crazy little guy. 9 times out of 10 though, this will work. Notice you can turn off the link so you can do individual fade ins and fade outs if you want. So you can do that if your heart so desires. Yay. Okay, another preference I like is zoom toggle follows edit selection. I'll definitely have that checked. And when I turn on zoom toggle, which is this little icon right here, if I move up and down in the edit window, it makes the track big or small based on that zoom toggle setting. Okay, let's move on to the mixing tab. I like having my sends default to -infinity. So if I ever go on a track and I turn on a send, so let's say I'm going to turn on a send here, you just click right here. Notice that it defaults at -infinity. That way I have to turn it up after the fact. So if I'm doing headphones or something, it won't accidentally, blow the player's head off by being all the way up at 0 and having audio pipe through it when I sign it. So I'll typically do it from -infinity before I do anything else. All right, so back on track, preferences. Okay, and we're on mixing. Another thing I like is link mix edit group enables. So if I turn on a group in the edit window, it also groups it in the mix window, so I don't have to go through both windows and group them twice. I just have to do it once. And this is something I'll do individually. I won't do globally because I like to have the ability to change the pan. But whenever you check this right here, whenever you create a send and say I've got something, let's see, let me get out of this, check this, get out of here, pan that hard left, and create a send here. Notice that it goes to the left. But I don't typically like having that preference selected in the setup preferences because you can click this FMP button, which does follow main panner or link panner to main from the actual track. So I'll just do that individually when I want and leave this unchecked in our system preferences. Okay. Sometimes you like to use a go-to EQ. If you use the same EQ very often, and you don't want to have to go through category, EQ, manufacturer, and find the specific EQ. If you just want it to show up in your plugin menu, notice that if I put the 4020 retro EQ and the 4030 retro compressor there, press OK. And if I go over here, anything that says inserts are going to be where my plugins are. You can make them show up here, or from the mix window, they'll be at the very top. Notice that you don't have a little menu like you do in the edit window right here. So that is either at this bottom window right there, or from view right here. Right there. Okay. All right. So back on track. So let's put on a plugin here. Notice that my retro EQ and retro compressor are already there. I don't have to go search by the category. There's all my dynamics and reverbs and stuff. And I can do it by the manufacturer as well. So you can see all the stuff by one particular plugin company. And it also shows up over here. Flat list is no good, but say if I just want to put the retro EQ on it, boom, and we got it. There's my retro EQ. Hey, whoop-de-doo. All right, so get that off for now. And go back to our preferences and finish this up. Okay. Always fill channel strips when banking. That's when you've got a controller and you're moving left and right on your controller to scroll through. Say you've only got 8 faders and you've got 24 tracks or more. Well, if you scroll left and right, you can do it by individually, and it might leave some of them blank to where that fader is now no longer going anywhere. Well, if you have this checked, it will always make sure that your controller is definitely controlling something in Pro Tools. And automation, we're going to leave for right now. We're not going to get into that. Okay, processing. Not a lot of things I change on here. Drag and drop from desktop conforms to session tempo. This is probably the only one I'll change to where recs and acid files only will do a sample rate conversion or tempo conversion when you import it. So if you have something at like 90 beats per minute and the loop was at 120, well, when you drag the 120 BPM loop into your 90 BPM session, it will automatically convert it if it is a recs file or acid file. But I don't use all files because that can degrade the quality of the audio file. Okay. TCE, whenever you change that's time compression and expansion, whenever you change the crop tool or the trim tool, notice that all these tools, or at least 3 of these tools, have a little drop-down menu. When you ever select the TCE, well, what time compression and expansion engine are you using? Well, that's from your system preferences. Notice that mine is selected to X form. which I don't have installed on this computer without my iLock. But you've got a couple different options. Most of the time you'll just see DigiDesign TCE, which is okay. Serato Pitch and Time Pro is one of the best. Time Shift is Waves, and I never use it. I never use it. It doesn't sound good. And Xform is really good. I'd say Xform is right on par with Serato Pitch and Time. Maybe not quite as good, but it holds right up. I'm just going to do that to make my life easier. MIDI and synchronization, you're not going to be changing a whole lot of stuff in here because we're not going to do a lot of MIDI. You'll go through that in the MIDI class. But that's basically all of the main setup preferences I like right there. But back over here on editing, we'll talk about the zoom toggle. I mentioned that a few minutes ago, and here's why I like to have that on. So if I go over here and I turn on zoom toggle, notice that the track I have currently selected, got really small. Well, if I want to control the height of that track, if I hold the control button down and press up, it gets taller. Press down, it gets smaller. And so say if I go something like this, remember my navigation commands with this keyboard focus. If I want to go up, I press P. If I want to go down, I press semicolon. Notice that when I'm going up and down, it's blowing up the track I'm selecting. So I find this very useful when I'm trying to edit things and I don't want to be using my mouse a lot. If I just want to navigate with the keyboard, I can do that. Notice that when I turn that off, it doesn't zoom toggle. You can turn that on with keyboard focus by pressing E. So if you want the track to expand when you move the cursor to it, you press the E button for expand, and now it will move and expand as you see fit. So notice if I make it really small, it makes everything really small. That makes it really big. And vice versa. Remember my option command. If you want to do an option like for all the tracks or anything like that, whatever shortcut you're doing, if you add option to it, it will do that to all tracks. So if I do Control Option down, it resizes everything. Hooray. So that's cool. So say you create a track and you want to fit all of your tracks to view height-wise in the edit window, so you can see everyone is the same exact size and it's filling up the entire window. So you have a nice fat edit window. Well, here's where we're going to use the keyboard shortcut Fat Finger. And Fat Finger is like it sounds. Imagine if you had a really, really big finger and you couldn't press one modifier. You just had to press all three of them at the same time. Well, that's Fat Finger. So if I hold Control, Option, Command, and then press the up or down arrow, doesn't matter which one, notice that it fits all of them to view. So that's pretty nifty. Another thing that you might not think about are wide meters versus skinny meters, or wide mix window versus narrow mix window. If I want to view the mix window and it's a narrow mix, I can do that under here, or do Option Command M. So Option Command M will make that wide. When I don't have a lot of tracks, I really like using the wide mix window. When I have a bunch of tracks in a session, I use the narrow mix window. But I always use wide meters. So if I want fat meters, because I like a little meat on my meters, if I hold Fat Finger, Control, Option, Command, and click the meter, it makes it wide. Oh, isn't that pretty cool? Another thing you might not think about here, sometimes I like to know exactly how I'm peaking when I'm recording. When I'm recording, I tend to record somewhere between -12 and -6 dB, as opposed to recording all the way up here at -3 at the top. I find that the summing engine doesn't like to add those numbers together very well. It sounds a little thin and grainy, and I have to turn all my faders down to like -20 in my mixes to do that. But that doesn't really sound that good. But if you want the math and the summing engine to go together a little bit better, sometimes it's nice to know where you're peaking, and it's nice to peak at a little bit lower level. So I like to peak somewhere between right where the top of this green is, just barely into the yellow. That way I have plenty of headroom, and I'm not overloading the digital summing engine as much. So if I want to peak between -12 and -6, and I want to see or show the peak value, if I want to command that volume indicator to become a peak indicator, now notice that it is a peak indicator. So if I hold command and just click it, it toggles between volume, which shows me the fader position. See that right there. Peak. Hey, whoop. All right, so you can see it's a horrible example, but it's showing me where I'm peaking. And as I get louder, it stays at its loudest peak. So it holds the loudest peak, and it can only get reset by A, clicking it, or B, having something louder pass it. So sorry if I'm yelling in your headphones real quick. So say you want to do that through all the tracks. So you want all of them to be look at peak? Well, remember my option command. If I command is what changes it. If I add option to it, now all of them are toggling. So I can see all of my peaks at one point. So that's very handy for me. I'll typically just look at the fader to know the fader position. So I don't really need it unless if I'm mixing to be shown right here. So I like looking at the peak when I'm tracking and then looking at volume when I'm mixing. Okay. Another thing that's kind of cool, say I want to put these faders right at 0. I want to reset everything. I want the option for all my faders to go back to 0. Well, if I option click my fader, it resets everything to its default starting position, which would be 0. So that goes for the fader, that goes for the pan, and say if I've got the retro EQ up or any kind of plug-in up and I've got things all over the place, if I option click it, notice it goes back to its starting location. Notice that starting location is on the right. So that's cool. Very handy little shortcut right there. All right, so don't want to make this video last forever, but that's kind of the majority of the main preferences that you should be aware of and that you should have set to have your Pro Tools system operate the way you expect it to. As far as editing and getting into using the tools and how everything works, we'll have more videos along the way as we continue to go. But just, I guess, last two things, as I forgot to talk about, is zooming in. Well, I talked about it here. You can zoom in this way. You can zoom in this way. Notice that the waveforms are getting a lot smaller. You can zoom in this way, this way, this way, this way. Well, I can't do it that way, so that's wrong. And you can also do it by using the brackets. Command right bracket zooms in, command left bracket zooms out. And if I hold the option button, it does the opposite. So command right and left zooms in horizontally, whereas command option bracket zooms the waveforms in. So say you've got your waveforms zoomed way in, so they're really big, or tiny, so they're really small, and you want to know what they actually look like, so you want to reset them. Last shortcut, fat finger, and then left bracket. So control option command left bracket will put all your waveform zooms back at their normal spot. Okay. So that would wraps up the setup preferences and other options. Well, no, that's okay. A couple more options, a couple more things I want to talk about because I noticed that my transport is missing. So notice I don't have any playback, rewind, or record controls. So if I want any playback, rewind, or record controls, if I click up here in that top right corner of the edit window and hold, I get some things that I can view. Transport, and notice that my transport pops up. And notice that there is a loop around my play button. So when I have that set up, playback will loop based on what you've got set up. So I've got a very long loop. Let's do a short one. Whoop, 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 whoop. All right, so you can see it's looping. It's just looping. How did I change that? Well, that's an option for how playback is changing. So if I go to options, I can see loop playback is checked. Command Shift L. All right, so Command Shift L turns that off. So I can do that from the options menu. I can do it from the shortcut. I can also right click. So if you right click, you can turn on loop playback right there. Right click on the record and you can change the type of record you're working on. Normal record is typically what you'll do 9 times out of 10. But if you are going to be punch recording or anything like that, like the guitar player messed up in the second chorus on the third chord, and he just wants to punch the third chord in on that second chorus, we'll flip it into quick punch mode. Also an option. Option quick punch or Command Shift P. And that's pretty nifty. So now what's cool about this is if I'm playing along and then so I guess I need to record enable the track. So let me do this here. All right, so I'm going to record this. I'm going to call this Tim Talk. All right, so I press play and nothing is happening. The track has not been engaged. My cursor started here. I've been talking for a few seconds, and now I'm going to punch the track in. So now I have engaged the track, and I'm actually recording. All right, so I'm a jackass, and I made some funny noises. Here's why we use Quick Punch to do that. Quick Punch will actually start recording. Let me turn this off. Okay. Quick Punch will actually start recording based on where the playback starts, not when you record enable the track. So say for instance I accidentally messed that up, and notice I just changed my trim tool from time compression expansion to the regular trim tool. I did that just by pressing F6 until it went to trim. Notice that I was really recording. I was really recording the whole time. So yay, whoop-de-doo. If you do not have Quick Punch on, let me show you the difference. Let me delete that, turn Quick Punch off, Command Shift P, and record enable my track. Press the space bar, and whoop-de-doo, I'm talking, hey, bananas are delicious. So I'm going to record enable that track. Ooh, notice that I can't Quick Punch in. Yeah, so I'd have to turn Quick Punch on in order to do that. So you can't quite punch in unless if you've got punch enabled. Okay, so you can just right click on that and turn on Quick Punch if you want. Okay, so those are the main preferences that you should check out. Everything else we'll cover in other videos. All right, so adios.